No matter how good you are at Darktide, there's no denying the game throws a lot at players. Not all baddies are created equal, and in fact, some are just a downright pain in the ass. Hey there friends, it's Kodiak here, welcome to Legacy Gaming. Today, we're breaking down every unique enemy in Darktide, ranking them, and crowning one or two baddies as the biggest pricks on Tertirum. As always, when making a rankings video, I like to remind folks that our opinions are subjective. These rankings mean nothing in the grand scheme of things, and ultimately, we just have a lot of fun putting together this type of content. You're allowed to disagree with us, that's fine. If you think something should be ranked differently, feel free to share your comments in the section below. Now, unlike other ranking videos we've done in the past, this one is really straightforward. There are only a few ground rules. First and foremost, enemies are ranked solely based on how annoying they are to handle. The higher the ranking, the more frustrating that enemy is to deal with. Second, we tried to shave some time off the video by only focusing on unique enemies and above. Isolated, I think we can all agree that the more basic enemies in the game are just cannon fodder, so we left them off the list. And third, we're using a traditional S to F tier model. The most annoying enemy in the game gets the S tier standard, and the least annoying enemy gets the F tier standard. Every other enemy falls somewhere in the middle. The goal here is to use the full breadth of the tier list. In the F tier, we have just one enemy, the least annoying enemy in the game, the shotgunner. Chances are you've killed a bunch of these guys without even knowing they were unique enemies because, well, they're just not that impressive. Sure, they have a slightly different attack pattern than the average soldier, and their shots do have a bit of a stagger component to them, but at the end of the day, these guys are just a step up from your common scab or drag fighter. The only time they're remotely annoying is when Darktide decides to absolutely screw you and throw about 50 unique enemies at your strike team at the exact same time. A few shotgunners in the mix, yeah, it's going to hurt, but that's not really because of them. They're an F-tier enemy that's more of a joke than anything else. Moving up to the D tier, we have just one enemy, the Mauler. I like the Mauler. They're a cool enemy that looks way more threatening than they actually are. They've got a few things going for them, like a full suit of armor, as well as a badass two-handed chain axe, but again, the bark is worse than the bite. Once engaged, they'll continue to pursue you, moving ever closer, winding up and swinging that axe wildly, all in an attempt to take you out of the fight. At first, they can be a bit intimidating, but after going toe-to-toe with a dozen or so of these brutes, it becomes clear they really are a piece of cake. Part of the reason they're so easy to deal with is their vulnerability, right in the middle of their chest. It's a massive target that, for whatever reason, isn't treated like armor, which makes them a real breeze to kill quickly. They're a cool enemy, but sadly just don't make the cut in terms of enemies that drive us nuts. Next up, the C tier, and this is where things get a bit interesting. We've got quite a few enemies to go through, so let's discuss. First is the Reaper. These are the Ogrins that wield the heavy stubber guns. Now, if you don't know what a heavy stubber is, I highly recommend you check out this video we've already released on the channel. It's definitely worth a watch if you're still trying to find weapons that you vibe with in the game, and it does include the heavy stubber. However, as far as the Reaper is concerned, I really don't feel like they're adding a whole lot to the mix. Yes, they've got a big beefy weapon, and sure, if you get pinned down, it sucks, but rarely can a Reaper accomplish that on its own. In fact, if you manage to whack the enemy once or twice, they're pretty much kaput. Staggering them takes away their biggest strength, their weapon, and since they're unarmored, it's relatively easy to cut them down. Add on to that the fact they're so big, making them an easy target, and it's rare that a Reaper will give you too much trouble. The reason they get the C rank, however, is because when left alone, the Reaper can cause some trouble, which is why it's important to kill them quickly. In the same vein as the Reaper is the Crusher, the melee armored Ogrin that wields a big mace-style weapon. These guys definitely belong in the C tier for a few key reasons. One, just like the Mauler, they will relentlessly pursue a player until they're dead. 2, their armor makes them a bit more resilient of a target. 3, because they're so large and they're a melee enemy, they pretty much fill your entire screen when trying to fight them. It's a bit disorienting, but that doesn't make it an apex predator. Because their attack pattern is predictable and their movement slow, it makes them really easy to counter. If the game throws 2 or even 3 of these big guys at you at the same time, well, that can get a bit tricky, but by and large, the Crusher is really more about intimidation than anything else. In the C tier is also the Mutant. These big, roided up oafs are quite an imposing presence on the battlefield and can definitely cause some chaos, but are quite easy to handle. They have 2 things going for them. First is their charge. There's nothing worse than a monster rushing at you full speed, and that can cause a moment of panic, but if you've run a few missions, you're most likely used to this phenomena. The mutant's pathing is a bit janky, just like some of the pathing of other enemies in the game, and this results in some frustrating moments where the mutant grabs you, even though they really shouldn't. Once grabbed, the mutant will slam and throw you around like a ragdoll, and while visceral, it really isn't the end of the world. It's disruptive, yes, but rarely is it the cause for a team to fall apart. Mutants are relatively easy to kill, which makes them much less scary to deal with. Most times you can free your teammates before the mutant has a chance to do any real damage, which is why the enemy isn't getting a higher ranking. Also in the C tier is the Poxburster. I love these enemies. They're a great addition to the game and add just the right amount of chaos into the mix. As soon as our team hears that dreaded tick, tick, tick sound, we immediately snap into recon mode as we try and identify the threat. While not the most dangerous enemy on the list, the Poxburster can absolutely throw off your rhythm. One misplaced explosion can separate your group, leave you vulnerable to other enemies, and now your run is on the brink of collapse. I think the biggest X factor with this enemy is just how frustrating it can be to locate. You have to use auditory clues to try and find the direction the enemy is coming, but it isn't always obvious. Depending on the mission you're playing, sometimes that sound can be above or below you, which is a lot more challenging to identify. Then, depending on your situation, you might just lose focus for a second, giving the Poxburster enough time to slip through the cracks and explode near your team. At the end of the day, though, if you've got some skill, bursters really aren't the worst enemy to encounter. They're just something you need to adjust for. Our final C-tier enemy is the Plague Ogre. This monstrosity is one of 3 currently in the game, and in our opinion, the easiest of the 3 to handle. The enemy itself doesn't have a very interesting moveset, and for the most part, just moves towards a certain player, taking swipes at them. Occasionally, you have to deal with a charge or a stomp, but these are rather easy to avoid, especially if you have some sort of obstacle in the encounter area you can use for cover. What makes the Plague Ogre a bit of an easy monstrosity is the fact that when targeted, you can pretty much just dodge backwards and avoid all of its attacks. Sure, you're probably not the one dealing damage to it at that point, but at least you're freeing up your teammates to just focus fire on the boss. I think the devs can make this a more impressive enemy if they work out some of the kinks, but for now, it lands on the C tier. Moving up to the B tier, we've got a few enemies to talk about. First is the Bulwark. Unlike the Reaper and the Crusher, this enemy wields a massive shield, and that's really the difference maker when it comes to ranking this enemy. That shield makes it much more challenging to engage the Bulwark simply because you have to reposition to engage it effectively. This often means moving out of an optimal position, leaving you exposed to other enemies that might be near the Bulwark. The enemy does exactly what it's intended to do, draws your team's fire, manages to soak a ton of damage, and distracts your team as other enemies try and kill you. The Bulwark is an annoying foe, made even more annoying if you don't have a great way to kill it. Psychers are ideal for this situation, but anything with stagger also helps. If you don't have those options or they're limited, the Bulwark can become a real problem really quick. Also in the B tier is the Gunner. When left alone, these enemies can single-handedly ruin a run. I know because it's happened to me more times than I care to count. Not only can they unleash a torrent of bullets if ignored, but the real secret sauce to their success is the ability to blend in with other enemies. Unless you're actively looking for these guys in a pack, it's very easy to miss them, and even if you're looking, there's still a good chance you'll glance right over them. Gunners are elusive. Maybe not so much as other enemies we still have to talk about, but they know how to avoid attention, staying in the backfield, and utilizing obstacles to stay relatively hidden. The real reason they don't make it higher on the list is because they're easy to deal with once you identify them. They don't put up much of a fight. They really don't run once engaged, and they're kind of a pushover once you actually get in their face. They're still deadly, don't get me wrong, but far from the apex predator on our list. Next up, we have the Flamer. If there's one sound I absolutely hate, it's the click, click, click indicating that a Flamer is being dropped onto the field. Flamethrowers are powerful weapons that have an added benefit of restricting the usable area in an encounter space. If you get a bad spawn and don't handle a Flamer fast enough, there's a good chance they'll be able to deal some significant damage as well as isolate members of your strike team, creating some serious vulnerabilities. Add on to that the fact that spotting a Flamer through the actual attack is a real challenge, and you've got yourself a tough enemy. Luckily, if you do manage to spot them, just like the Gunner, they're really easy to take care of. They don't put up much of a fight once engaged, and they do fall over with just a few whacks from a melee weapon. Flamers are all about the illusion of danger, but when you peel back the layers and learn how to engage them, they're really not that bad. The final B tier enemy on our list is the Beast of Nurgle. This is another monstrosity, and quite honestly, wouldn't be so high on our list if it wasn't also buggy as hell. At the time of making this video, the Beast of Nurgle has the ability to swallow a player and spit them out, oftentimes over the edge of a map. Now this sometimes works properly and the player will just be downed on the edge, but other times the game will freak out and you'll fall through the map instantly dying. For that reason alone, the Beast of Nurgle is deadly, but it's also a pretty challenging enemy to deal with outside of that. It has the ability to slow you down, incapacitate you like we just talked about, and has a lot of durability. If you catch this monstrosity at the wrong time in conjunction with other enemies, you're looking at a rough time. Even if the issues get patched, it would still be a formidable foe, especially in levels where you don't have a lot of maneuverability, which is quite a few. On top of that, the thing can even be deadly after it's been slain, with its corpse bursting, causing significant damage the closer you are, sending you flying, potentially to your death. While still dangerous, a Beast of Nurgle does have a huge weak point squarely on its back, which does make them a relatively easy target to kill, but they still bring a lot to the table in terms of deadliness. In the A tier, we have a few enemies, and this is really the point on the list where we have to consider everything a real pain. At least that's how we view it. First up is the Poxhound. These guys will rush your teammates, incapacitate them indefinitely until rescued, and have some of the worst pathing we've ever experienced in a game. Not only are they fast, but they're erratic, and that never makes for a good combination. In fact, unless they're rushing straight at you over a big encounter area, they're really hard to see coming. The Poxhound adds a lot of chaos to any mission, especially when you're confronted with other dangers. The chance to have one teammate suddenly out of the mix is a huge issue and a real threat when the Hound is stalking your team. Luckily, they're easy to kill, and that's really why they don't get any higher on our list. To kill them, you might have to wait until they attack or interrupt them with a well-timed block, but as long as you have a competent team, it shouldn't make too much of an impact. The next A-tier enemy is the Sniper, and let me just say this, these guys suck. Their damage potential is astronomical, and in the right scenario, they can absolutely tear your team apart. At the time of making this video, it's entirely possible to have a sniper attacking your team from outside the playable area, and that makes them even more challenging to kill. Not only do they have insanely high damage, but they also run away when confronted, making them one of the most elusive enemies in the game. The sniper also gets exponentially more deadly if you don't have a team equipped to deal with them. For example, a super melee-heavy team really doesn't have a lot of tools to deal with a sniper picking you off from across the map. Sure, you might reach them eventually, but not until they landed a few pot shots, most likely taking out a teammate or two. They're a pain, plain and simple, and are amongst the most annoying enemies in Darktide. As far as annoying goes, the Rager definitely takes one of the top spots on our list. These enemies are relentless in their pursuit of cold-blooded murder, and their janky hitbox makes them even more potent across the board. We've talked about enemies like the Mauler and Crusher relentlessly pursuing you when attacking, while the Rager dials that up to 11, swinging its dual-wielded weapons with a ferocity no other enemy in the game possesses. In most cases, if you're stuck going one-on-one with a Rager and they've managed to close the gap, you're dead, or at least you're in for a rough time. That's just the way it is. In our opinion, they're the most deadly, non-monstrosity melee enemy in the game, especially in groups. Luckily, they can be killed with some well-placed shots to the middle of the chest, but that requires you to really keep your head on a swivel, because if they get the jump on you, it's most likely game over. The final A-tier enemy on our list is the Demon Host, the third monstrosity currently in the game. High damage, the ability to instantly kill a member of your team, erratic movement, you name it, the Demon Host brings it to the table. This enemy is an absolute nightmare to deal with solo, but in conjunction with other enemies can absolutely ruin your run. Unlike the other monstrosities, the Demon Host will focus fire on one member of your team until they're knocked. Once they're knocked, the Demon Host can lift up that player and after a few seconds, instantly kill them. What? This is by far the most deadly monstrosity in the game, made even more challenging because it's not easy to engage. Its wild and chaotic movements make it hard to attack with ranged weapons, let alone target the weak spot on its head. Couple that with the Demon Host's raw killing potential, and quite honestly, this is one of the most annoying and deadly enemies in the game. Luckily, in most cases, you can completely avoid this monstrosity if you don't engage it, but that's not always the case. But that is the reason why it doesn't get a top spot on our list. We've finally arrived at the S tier, and by the power of subtraction, there are only two enemies left to talk about. These are easily the most annoying, most disruptive foes in all of Darktide, and can quite literally tear your team apart in just a few seconds. In our eyes, these are the apex predators of the game, but let's unpack why. First is the bomber. If you've started pushing the difficulty of your missions, you know exactly why this enemy is getting an S tier. Capable of throwing grenades from across encounter areas with pinpoint accuracy, this enemy has the ability to kill, disrupt, displace, and evade your team. Not only are they incredibly elusive, but they're also annoying beyond belief. Because they hang out around entry points, the bomber will often throw a grenade, sneak into a doorway, and pop out somewhere else on the map. They also have a tendency to hang out well out of sight, which makes them incredibly hard to spot. In fact, most times you'll have to deal with 1 or 2 grenades before you can even locate the bomber. Their impact is massive, and in conjunction with other enemies, they are the X factor that can quickly sideline your mission, completely splitting up your team and isolating you as an easy target. If you don't take them out of the fight, there's a fair chance they will ruin your run, and possibly your friendships. That leaves just one enemy left on our list, the Trapper. How many of you have had a run completely thrown off because of the Trapper? I bet a fair number of you. Equipped with a wildly accurate net gun, this enemy can easily take 2 or more teammates out of action in just a few seconds. Being trapped is the kiss of death, and unless your teammate can quickly react, there's a good chance you'll end up dead. The real challenge here is that oftentimes a Trapper is thrown into the mix with other enemies. By choosing to free a teammate, you're giving the Trapper more time to load another net and incapacitate once again. There's not a huge cooldown period between shots, which makes these enemies such a pain. They're also elusive, employing a hit-and-run style pattern when trapping players. The simple fact that being netted leaves you completely helpless and exposed is bad enough, but trying to kill a Trapper can be just as big a hassle. With a much less subtle audio cue, it's almost impossible to know when they're coming before it's too late, and unless you're quick with a dodge, the chance of them netting at least one teammate is pretty high. If you're in any way isolated from your team, especially in an area where the team can't get to you, it's a done deal. Receiving an S rank on our tier list was a no-brainer because the Trapper is truly awful. And that's our list. Let us know what you thought in the comment section below. Do you agree or disagree with our rankings? And of course, feel free to share your most hated enemy because at the end of the day, we're all just out here trying to survive the perils of Darktide. As always, if you enjoy our videos and you want to support the channel, feel free to hit that thumbs up and consider subscribing. We have a lot more Darktide content planned, and we'd love for you to come back and check it out. As we head towards the end of the year, we've also set our sights on 2023. There are so many cool games on the horizon, and if you want to learn a bit more about them, we have 2 awesome videos to help you get prepared for the new year. You can also join us on Discord. We just reworked our entire server, so if you're looking to talk about the latest games or just want to be part of an awesome community, check out the link in the description below. My name is Kodiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.